Soccer. Okay, so the stream, let's see, is live.
We're live.
Okay, so we're good there. We're recording. So I'm going to start the recording, Amy, as soon as you give me the go-ahead.
Go for it.
Okay.
We're professionals.
I know. Starting to figure this out.
Thank you.
Support for Wrong About Everything comes from Minnesota's credit unions. Credit unions are locally based, member-owned financial cooperatives that return earnings to members through higher savings rates, lower loan rates, and reduced fees. Visit mncun.org for more information.
And we are back for another week of Wrong About Everything. I am former Republican Senate Majority Leader Amy Koch.
And I'm former Minnesota Speaker of the House Kurt Doudt.
I am former DFL State Senator Carla Bigham.
And I'm recovering former U.S. Congressman Dean Phillips.
And we are Wrong About Everything. Well, don't adjust your podcast app or your cameras if you're on YouTube, because, I got a new crew. It's the Amy and Friends Hour. Sorry, Brian and Javier, but I think people will agree this is what you're going to be demanding after we're done. Thank you all for being here. Do you mind if we do just like a quick go around? Everybody tell people obviously probably know who all of you are, but do a little intro. Carla, you want to go first?
Oh, first I'm going to say for credit unions, I'm a current Blaze Credit Union member.
Hey,
so there you go,
we
the
love-
sponsorship. There
we're
you go,
in
Amy.
Credit Union Network
There you go.
studio right now.
Yeah, there you go.
We
So I'm
love
helping
it.
you out there. I'm actually a current Washington County Commissioner, but spent 9 years of service in the Minnesota legislature, served in both chambers, and did a lot of time also on campaign. So really...
And tell them about the fantasy football.
Oh, man, did I crush Senator Housley in the championship game. I mean, it was pitiful how bad I beat her. And that's twice now that I've been the champ. Champ is here.
Yes, you are.
And so how many times you won, Amy? How many times you won, Amy?
I have no trophies.
Okay, well then we'll let it go. We'll let it go. We'll let it go now.
10 years.
And hopefully someday the state will pass sports betting. Someday.
Yeah, amen. Phillips to God's ears.
Yep.
All right, Congressman, go for it. I mean, I think people know. You ran for president, for goodness sakes.
We Democrats love participation trophies, Amy, so I've got a few
Thank
extra
you.
on my
I got
shelf
10
for
of them.
No, I hate referring to myself even as a former politician, but I love Minnesota, and I loved my work in distilled spirits, and then ice cream, Belvedere vodka, Phillips, and then Talenti gelato. And then after that 2016 election, was so distraught about how otherwise decent Americans were being told by Angertainment that we're more divided and it's intractable, that I should do something. And I ran for Congress a little bit on a whim, and it was joyful, and it was meaningful, and deeply painful, and also the best experience of my life. And now I'm taking a little time in California. Unfortunately, I went from a deep freeze to terrible fires, and taking a little time to reflect and contemplate next chapters, and thrilled to be with all of you who share that spirit of decency and thoughtful debate and deliberation, then hugging it out.
We're so glad. And how are the fires? Have things calmed down a little bit? I've heard the winds have dropped a little. Is that true? Or
Yeah, they have. I got to tell you all, though, it's horrifying to see destruction that for most of us you only see on television screens from worlds away. To see it hit neighborhoods that look so familiar to all of us, and to think 10,000 families lost everything in one day. And for a market that, housing is already too expensive, the economy is somewhat weak, it's really, it's traumatic. And kids living in fear, and frankly, and we'll probably talk about it today, a question about government competence and leadership and preparation and warning. And I can tell you, as a person who just arrived, I found it awfully difficult to determine when I had to evacuate, what I should do, and a lot of lessons learned. So it's sad, and but like every community, it will come back, and but we're going to be facing a lot more of this, you all, whether it's hurricanes,
fires. Yeah. Oh, we lost Dean for a second, but I'm sure we're going to get him back here in a minute. Let's go ahead, Kurt, do a short introduction, and then
thanks, Amy. This is actually my first time on your show, and I am
know.
loving it. I can't believe it. I mean, So I'm a recovering legislator. Obviously, I left the legislature last February, almost a year ago, and have never looked back. I'm loving it. I work for a company in Washington, D.C., a consulting firm. So travel the country and have picked up on some hobbies that I haven't been enjoyed in years because you don't have time for that when you're in the legislature. So I'm renewing my pilot's license, and I bought a little airplane that I'm restoring, and some parts weren't available for that. So I'm bought a company to manufacture parts for airplanes and just whatever. I'm just having fun in my life.
I think as all of us could agree, isn't it kind of nice on the other side?
It is.
I mean, it is fun to be elected, but it's really nice on the other side.
It is. I think when you're doing it, you don't realize what you're missing, right? Because it is a little exciting to be in elected office, but when you're out, you kind of get to appreciate life again. So.
Agree.
Consuming. People don't realize
how consuming it is. Yeah, for
the toll it takes on relationships and oneself. It's it's real.
Yeah,
That's right.
It's real. Well, all right. So all of you, so glad to have you. Welcome to Minnesota Credit Union Network Studio. Thanks everybody for tuning in. You can catch us on your favorite podcast app. You can get us on YouTube. Go to our YouTube channel. We're trying to build that up because Brian loves to be on camera and there's nothing he loves more. So please throw him a bone. Thank you to Gabe Noah, who is our producer here at MBC Studios. You can follow MBC Studios on Facebook and check them out. They've got all kinds of cool podcasts that he produces. You can go to our Wrong About Everything -podcast.com website, although I will be honest with you, I must be in charge of updating that thing because it has not been updated in quite some time, but go there. And then also want to thank our sponsors, Bradshaw and Bryant. The entire team of attorneys and staff are dedicated to providing the legal advice you need, combined with the service and personal attention you deserve. If you have questions about how they can assist you with a personal injury, wrongful death, or criminal defense matter, do not hesitate to contact them. Consultations, Carla, the consultations are free.
Good.
They're free. Please contact them at 1-800-770-7008 or just go to minnesotapersonalinjury.com. But as Mike Bryant likes to say, no snitches. Mike Ryan has a very strong no snitches rule.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's pretty unambiguous about that. He will not defend snitches. So, all right. Well, let's start with Minnesota. There's big stuff happening this weekend into Monday in D.C. So we're going to cover that, folks. But oh boy, Minnesota.
Yeah. Yes.
So let's see.
Oh gosh, now.
Oh gosh, now. We've been saying for 2 weeks we needed like a whiteboard up here just to keep people, like, since the election, to keep people on track with. We're 67 in the House. We're 33 in the Senate.
Not for long.
No, not for very long. Curtis Johnson did the deed in Roseville, right? That's the area. So Democrat made it 67-66. The power sharing agreement ended. There was discussions of a power sharing agreement, but the Republicans have the votes for a speaker. However, the Democrats didn't show up. So that's what happened this week. So session actually started on Tuesday, and Democrats, in an effort to deny quorum, and I don't think they're denying the denial, to deny quorum, they did not show up. There was a secret swearing in at the Minnesota History Center. So the 66 members, not Curtis Johnson, swore in on Sunday. On Tuesday, the Republicans met, were sworn in by Secretary of State Steve Simon, who then declared, after taking roll call, that there were only 67 and this did not constitute a quorum. So Minnesotans have heard more about quorum than they care to ever know this week.
They don't care.
They don't care, right?
Nor do they understand.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so what has happened since then? He denied quorum. The Republicans, apparently there's a rule, and former Speaker, you could tell us this. Yeah. So what is the rule about the oldest member?
So it basically, it says that the Secretary of State will convene the session.
Yes.
And so on the very first day of session, until the House is organized. So the Secretary of State Simon came in and did that. It says the Secretary of State or the oldest member of the chamber, if the Secretary of State is
and by age,
not
present. Time in.
Correct. It's just by age. What an antiquated rule, right?
Wow.
And that oldest member happens to be Paul Anderson, who is a Republican. So the Republicans thought, if Secretary of State Simon doesn't recognize us to make motions, which he really should have, he gets to preside over the chamber, but you don't get to rule over the chamber. Whoever has the votes in the chamber still, their will is what happens. So they basically kind of ruled him out of order after he gabbled out, and Paul Anderson took the rostrum, and they kept the session going. They finished their business. They elected Lisa Dameth as the speaker, and
I want to point this out too. The first woman speaker from the Republican Party, the fourth woman in state history, the first woman of color,
correct,
and the first person of color elected Speaker of the Minnesota House.
I think that's true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I think that's true.
Amazing.
Yep.
So some big history there.
Yep.
Some big history made. Okay, so but then the Democrats said no. That is not legal because 68 is a quorum. And so here's the math, which I promised there would not be math, but
Yeah, you promised me that. I'm going.
I know, Carla. I'm sorry. So
I'm out.
134 members of the House.
Yep.
So of that, 68 would be a quorum, and that's what you need to pass the bill.
And the language says a majority of the members elected.
Yes.
Constitutes a quorum. Well, the members elected were 133 currently. Correct. So the Republicans are interpreting this. And really, I do believe, and I'll defend them, I believe it's up to the House to determine and judge their own rules, right? Not the Secretary of State. Potentially, we'll find out. Maybe it's going to be the Supreme Court that makes that decision.
I think it's going to go to the Supreme Court.
Right now, I'm with the House. But there is another provision of statute that says it takes the same language, a majority of the members elected, to pass a bill. That language
the
has
exact same language as
same
what it
language,
says to
different
convene.
section. That language says a majority of members elected to pass a bill, and over time, through precedents and through court decisions, it has been determined that language means 68 members. Mm-hmm. And everybody understands it takes 68 members to pass a bill. This other language, which happens to be the same but in a different place, has not been tested.
Right.
Has not been, a judge has not looked at that and said, it must be 68. So we don't really know.
So here's a couple things. I'm not going to dispute that's what the Constitution says.
Right.
Black and white.
It's black and white.
And it hasn't been disputed, as Kurt said. So I think that's there it is.
And I just was trying to explain it as simply as I can.
I think that's fine. Where I would start disagreeing are on two things. There is in state law the process to challenge an election. Okay, the legislature passed laws to say if you want to challenge an election, here's the process. So that is allowed. And so that's where I think the question is going to start to be is even though the Constitution does say that the body does get the final say in who is seated, it hasn't been challenged. And I think that's where the Supreme Court's going to come into play and start talking about that. Because why would the legislature have passed? They would just be able to seat whoever they wanted then if they didn't want to put that in law in other areas. So
you're talking about the Curtis Johnson seat?
Yes.
So the judge said he invalidated the election and said you cannot issue an election certificate.
I'm sorry. Talking about the Tapke.
You're moving to another issue.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry. I was talking about Tapke. I had the two things going on. But here's the other thing. Okay. So do we want to furnish Curtis Johnson first and then move?
Because here's the deal. Sorry. If we had the whiteboard up, this is not your.
This is why you need it.
Yeah. This is why you need it because there's a Shakopee seat that was challenged in court. The judge ruled this week. It was this week or last week.
It was this week.
You're right. Oh, so much news.
And real quick, for the record, no one is disputing the Curtis Johnson thing. The Democrats accepted the judge's ruling, and that's going to come up later in this discussion.
They're not even appealing it, right? Yeah.
No,
they don't agree with it. They don't agree with it, but they are not challenging it.
Except that the Republicans are questioning the calling of the special election and the timing of the special election.
But that's the Republicans.
Yes,
the Democrats
based
have
on
accepted the
governor.
judge's ruling.
Correct.
Just saying.
Correct.
Yeah. No, they have. But there is a question because the seat was not vacant when the governor called it, and there's some definite language about a seat must be vacant, and it wasn't vacant not because Curtis Johnson, but because Jamie Becker Finn, the seated representative, was still in her seat until they're sworn in or until the first of the year.
She was the representative,
right?
And he would not have taken office until January 14th. But there is specific language that talks about the House. If this happens, if a judge invalidates an election, the House actually gets a chance to review that and make their own determination, and then they can inform the governor that, yes, this is a vacant seat. And they actually have, I think it's 20 or 21 days to do that. So if they wanted to, and the Republicans have enough votes, they could stretch it out for a full 21 days after the 14th. And then that's the soonest the governor could issue the writ of special election.
But
and then he has to do it
before the end of the year
for 35 days, right? So now you're at like, what is that, 56 days? And it's in the Republicans' best interest to let that seat sit empty for as long as possible. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that because you've got those citizens in that district that don't have representation, right?
Yeah, so that wouldn't be represented.
Politically, it's advantageous to them, but it's probably not the right
But
thing
also,
to
you
do.
have to follow the rules around a special election. There are certain rules.
So the problem is the governor, they knew. I think the governor obviously must have known that the Democrats were going to try to deny a quorum and not show up, right? So they concocted this plan to say, Curtis Johnson, why don't you issue a letter of resignation, and then that will trigger me, and I can issue the writ of special election, and we can do it as fast as possible. And that is not what statute says. So he issued this letter of resignation from a seat that he's barred by the courts from holding and doesn't have. The whole thing was clunky.
It was clunky.
And the Republicans, I do believe the Republicans will win that case because the statute is very clear.
So Dean, I'm sure you've been following this really kind of wondering. So a couple things. And then also, and I'm just going to do this really quickly because it is all part of it. There is the Shakopee seat where the 20 votes were missing. Representative Brad Tabke, a Democrat, won by 14 votes on election day, or was declared the winner with 14 votes. So that 20 votes was in question. Yep. That did go to court. The good judge did rule this week that, in fact, I actually thought the judge went further than they were going to. I thought they were going to say, well, the body gets to decide. The judge didn't say that. The judge decided that the election was in Brad Tabke's favor.
I agree with you. I thought the judge was going to.
I thought the judge was going to say it's the body's decision.
Yep.
They did not. The judge did not. So that also came back. All right. So even seating Brad Tabke, you do not get to 67 votes for the Democrats until after all of this is decided with the special election of Curtis Johnson.
Right.
So, okay. So, Dean, here's my question. So many people say, I don't care. I don't care. You need to go and get your job done, people. You're being paid. Get your job done. Your job is to show up at the Now, the Democrats are saying they're working in their district, and there's been lots of tweets and stories about that. So tell me, what do you think? Do you think this is working? You're great about calling balls and strikes. How are you reading this?
I got in trouble regularly because I took a common
you
sense
100%
approach.
did.
I'm going to do it again, which is, 95% of Minnesotans don't give a hoot about what we just talked about. They just are just like, what? WTF? Again. They can't get their act together. And, look, if I'm a normal Minnesotan watching this, I would say, you know what? If they're going to be tied and they're going through this nonsense, how about give one side 1 year of the speakership and then the other side the other year? This notion of the inability to simply come to some reasonable conclusions. And by the way, you saw what happened in the House of Representatives 2 years ago with the Kevin McCarthy debacle. Imagine, when we have these tiny margins in legislative bodies, it's going to get awfully complicated selecting any speaker of the House moving forward. Anyway, that's one thing that came to mind.
Yep.
The other is I'm surprised that our Minnesota statutes don't better articulate, the Constitution articulate these things. Imagine if we had a disaster in which there was not going to be a quorum, and we had to act. Right now it does not account for that, which is something we should at least address. I'll say the other thing I noticed is that as I read the Constitution because of this issue, I don't know if you guys knew this, I didn't know there was privilege from arrest for those serving their terms.
Oh, we do.
I have a story about that. I'll share it later.
I won't go there, but I'm
not
just
for
saying,
me.
That was so it's funny how you turn over a rock and you find out a little more. And I'll tell you, I think Minnesotans, if they knew that, they might be a little surprised.
Yeah, so here's the rule. And this guy can get abused. You cannot be arrested and kept from session
Right.
during a vote, and you also cannot be, by the way, detained
on your way to or on
to
your way
a vote.
from.
Right.
Yeah.
So the idea was like you can't have a cop that would stop a legislator to kill a vote.
Right.
Yeah.
That was the idea. But I did have one person in the middle, like one evening.
Legislators are
get
creative,
pulled over.
aren't they?
They're creative, and he tried to pull the card, and I was like, oh no! It's not for you in the evening to just mess with us.
Dean, you probably
That's
don't.
the funny,
you probably
that's
don't
the
know.
funny thing about this is like, they thought about that. The idea
Yeah,
of maybe
yeah.
someone would pull a legislator out before they could vote, but they didn't think about just quantifying or articulating very clearly a circumstance like this. It's interesting.
And the Senate is 67. It's odd. The House is 134.
Correct.
The chance of a tie,
Right.
It's 100%. Like,
Yeah.
it can happen.
Yes,
It has happened.
yes.
So to Dean's point, the reason and getting to the tab key thing is the judge made a ruling.
Yep.
And he should be seated. It is horrible precedent because you can mess around and find out in future legislative sessions. Then I mean, you got to think about what would happen if the shoe is on the other foot. And nobody wants to do that. There's opportunity for tomfoolery down the way here, and stop it. Just stop it. Grow up. Split the power, like Dean said. Figure it out. And what are you supposed to do when one side is saying, I don't care what a judge says. I'm going to do what I want to do. That is a dangerous precedent to set. And it's just not okay to act like that. And so what Minnesotans expect, this looks bad on everybody. Everybody. It looks bad on our process. It just looks bad. So here's the thing. For 2 weeks, Damith, go ahead. Be speaker. Because you know what? You need 68 votes. Go ahead. Be speaker. And then once the Curtis Johnson seat is taken care of, whatever happens, we reevaluate. If Democrats win, we go to the power sharing agreement. That is all Democrats have asked, is just let us have the power sharing agreement so that we can get things done for Minnesota. But what are they supposed to do when they have been told time and time again, we are crossing a dangerous line and we aren't sitting a duly elected official? Horrible precedent. That's all I'm saying.
So, Carla, I'm going to say this, because I don't think it's not about the Tabke seat. I think Tabke should be seated. I said that this morning on WCCO.
Yep.
I think the judge, if I'm saying the judge decided in Curtis Johnson, which I am, and then Curtis Johnson, them's the breaks,
Yep.
then I'm saying in this case the judge is deciding you're going to accept it. However, there is also a very terrible, dangerous precedent for people to not show up at the Capitol to intentionally deny a quorum. You do have a job. And you can. I get it. You're working in the district. I get it's painful to be in the minority. Look, when I went to the Senate, we hadn't been in the minority for decades, and I was in the deep minority for almost my entire time in the legislature. It blows. We were in the super minority where we couldn't sustain Governor Pawlenty's veto. It stinks.
I spent 5 years in the minority in the Senate.
Them's are the breaks.
Change is hard, and these people got to deal with it.
Yep, just got
they got a job to do.
And I think,
I agree.
I don't disagree with you about the Tabke seat. I think, and what worries me here is that things are getting personal.
Yes.
Right? And when you start doing that sort of thing, you start going down a path that it's very tough to return from.
100%.
And I have told a lot of people, and I know from personal experience, I spent 4 years as the Speaker of the House, right?
And you weren't known as being Mr.
I remember those 4 years.
I wasn't maybe Mr. Nice Guy, but I was effective.
My crutches are just right over here, Mr. Speaker.
But the reality is, Lisa has got a very difficult job. And I know in defense of the Republicans, what they're doing is they were just going to show up on the first day of session like every other session in the history of the entire state, and they were going to have an election for Speaker, and whoever got the most votes was going to win.
Which happens every single time. You can't ask Republicans to vote for a Democrat. You can't ask Democrats to vote for a Republican.
It just so happens that on the first day of session, there were 67 Republicans and 66 Democrats. Well, and then what happens is once you get back to the 67-67, there's not enough votes to overturn that. So she gets to be Speaker for 2 years. Here's the problem. She's Speaker in an environment where she doesn't have a majority of the votes.
It's actually
to
a
back
terrible
up her
place
decision.
to be.
I mean, talk about being set up for failure. It's the last job in the world I would ever want if I didn't have enough votes to back up the decisions I was making.
This week, we have a ceasefire agreement in the Middle East. The Senate, Minnesota Senate, had agreed to a power balance.
Yeah.
And the House can't do this? Like this is what is so upsetting about the whole situation, that they could not just agree to something very similar, where you get a unanimous decision, where you have Speaker Hortman and Speaker Damas standing up there like Bobby Joe Champion, and
right.
Well, you could have an agreement, but I know you can't have two speakers.
There's a way to do it. I actually wrote a way for them to do it. Yeah, I think they were going to do it.
But just like Bobby Joe and Jeremy Miller, you could have an agreement where it's unanimous, everybody agrees to it, you could get things done. But right now, to your point, Kurt, this is personal, and it's about
and it's only going to get worse.
Stop going after each other. Stop fighting each other. Start fighting for Minnesota. Start fighting for the cost of housing, the cost of food, daycare, school achievement gap, closing that achievement gap for schools, and our infrastructure. Start focusing on what Minnesotans expected you to do, and stop fighting each other. Get it done, and get the power agreement going, and get moving.
Just an honest question. We're very honest on this podcast. Does anyone here believe that the Democrats were the shoe on the other foot and 67, 66 would do differently than the Republicans?
They would do it in
just
a heartbeat.
Being honest.
Melissa Hortman would seat that member.
Now, I'm not talking about Temke. Doesn't get him to 67.
It's about would Melissa Hortman
that up? It ain't about that.
Would Melissa Hortman be Speaker today if
there would be
Josh
a power
Heinzman and Brainerd didn't live in his district?
There'd be a power sharing agreement.
Okay, you are not being honest.
I am being 100% honest.
You are not, because in a
because
heartbeat,
if she didn't have 68 votes,
she
wouldn't be able to do anything. No, I am being 100% honest. And you know what? Amy would do the same thing. Amy would not be.
Well, we're not talking about Amy, and we're not talking about you.
I'm just saying, I don't agree with that.
Yeah.
I think Melissa Hortman knows she can't do jack squat without 68 votes. And that is where Lisa Damath is sorely misunderstanding what's going to happen in 2 weeks when they're 67, and she can't do crap, and she has a hot potato in her hand, and she's chasing a title to do nothing.
Got a tough job.
There is an ultimate job.
You know what we're not talking about, though, is...
Yeah, go ahead, Dean.
We no longer live in an era where we have such extraordinary power vested in these positions.
Yep.
You know, the caucus conference, you know, that social pressure and the threat, you can imagine, you know, imagine the Freedom Caucus with Speaker Johnson in Washington. You see the power, even a handful of active members.
Yep.
I think influence these decisions far more than the individual we're speaking about.
Action for liberty here.
We're going to see a lot more of that, because the threat is, if you don't do this, you're never going to become speaker. And then it puts these candidates in a position of, you know, damned if you do, damned if you don't. And we're going to be seeing a lot of that in many states and, of course, at the federal level for, I think, some time to come. This is not going to be the last we're talking about issues like this.
Yeah. Both leaders were at the chamber dinner. The chamber dinner is the annual Minnesota chamber dinner where
that
the
had
speakers,
to be interesting.
And both leaders were there. Melissa Hortman and Lisa Damath showed up, and I just sat there and felt like what a hard position. Like I try not to get too wrapped up in this, because I just know that these are two people that are in a position that how could anyone have anticipated all of this that is happening? And it's tough. That's what I don't know.
I will say
Tough
this,
spot.
and we haven't really talked a lot about this perspective of it. We because we are kind of in the weeds and have participated in this in our careers, and we understand it, know the rules. The public doesn't care about a quorum. What they saw this week, and I'm going to say, whether you agree with them or not, the Republicans won the week, because the Democrats, the empty seats and the visual of that picture all week long, empty seats in committee, empty seats on the floor, and I think, you know, they've got to decide whether they think they're going to win at the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court's going to rule all of this invalid. If not,
which very likely could happen.
It could happen. It could happen. They could view this language like that language and determine that 68 is an actual quorum and invalidate all of it. I don't believe they're going to do that. And the reason I say that is the Supreme Court. I mean, I got into battles that went to the Supreme Court. Dayton vetoed vetoed the House and the Senate.
How did that one turn out?
The Supreme Court did not rule and sent us. I won that.
I
won that.
Yep,
because the Supreme Court, I wanted a ruling out of the Supreme Court, but they wouldn't rule, so they sent us to arbitration, and we ended up figuring out. I was able to cobble enough money together to get to the next legislative session.
It's unknown what the court will do.
But my point is, the Supreme Court does not like weighing in on things that involve the legislative branch or the executive branch.
It's like
they
figure
don't
your
need
own
to.
stuff out.
That's right.
Even in shutdowns, I was at the Supreme Supreme Court for the shutdown
And
and the budget, and they don't like to. They're
not babysitters.
So there's the issue of whether the Republicans were right or wrong to do this. I think you believe they were probably not right to do this. If I'm judging I think they did what every other legislature has done for 150 whatever years, is showed up on the first day and elected a speaker. I don't know how the Democrats really get out of this and save face at this point. They're going to have to show up with their tail between their legs at some point. And I don't believe things get reversed. Now, that doesn't mean the Republicans have won the day. I think they won the PR battle with the public, but they still have to govern without 68 votes, and that's going to be impossible.
No, I don't disagree.
Especially once you've made everybody so mad. Right?
I think when the dust settles in 2 weeks, we're going to have a lot more clarity and see after the special elections, after the court rulings, and that's really going to be. It's like winning the battle but not winning the war, vice versa, right? Yeah. And so I think you're 100% right on that, and I don't think this looks good on anybody. But I don't know until May or until there's a state shutdown. I don't know if anybody's going to pay attention until then. To kind of your point, so let's see how it plays out. But I'm going to keep saying this: who's ever caught holding that hot potato when you don't have 68 votes, that's who's going to get in trouble. And that's
we're
just
going
how
to see the further erosion of faith in government by center left, center right Americans who are just knocking their heads against the wall about how otherwise talented adults can deny the representation that is so core and important to democracy. And that I think that's something we got to talk about a little bit more. Is just the erosion of that massive center and their faith. Imagine our institutions, and that's dangerous.
Imagine, Dean, if this was happening in California right now when they're going through a natural disaster like this. I mean, think about how the optics would be there if this was the California delegation. I mean, and we're coming up on some terrible weather this upcoming week. I mean, if something happens, there could be an unexpected event in our state that will cause everybody to come together to have to figure this out. But I just feel like leadership right now, and I think the governor has a role in this. I'm not going to lie.
The governor has been very quiet.
Yeah, the governor has a role in bringing whomever, whether it's Hortman and Damon together or all four together, to say we've got neither of you have 68. Figure it out. Let's go. Let's get this together. But until there's a guarantee that there's going to be no tomfoolery in the in shenanigans and everybody's getting seated, I don't see that happening until after the special election. And so in the court rulings, I just don't.
It feels like the tab key thing and whether or not the Republicans seat him, that's the real issue here.
Yeah, I agree.
Necessarily was Lisa Damoth elected speaker.
No.
I think they don't like that, but and they don't believe it should have been that way.
2 weeks with the special election anyway. I think that was offered. I think Hortman offered her to be the speaker for 2 weeks. Yeah. And then I agree with you. I don't think it's the Damon thing. And everybody's got to stop making this so personal. It isn't actually about Brad Tapke. It's about protecting the 20,000 people that will be disenfranchised. I mean, you already said that with Johnson, if that those folks would not have been, if they would have stretched that out for 21 days, they would have not been represented. Well, throwing Tapke out, his 20-some thousand people would not be represented. So I think we got to keep all of that on the same level there. So to me, it's about Tapke's district, not Brad Tapke himself.
But yes, you say that, but we all still know each other. We're all still people. I remember when I was leader or speaker, I'd have members that would come to me, or I would warn them, hey, this is going to happen to you. This group is going to attack you in your district. They could care less until it actually happened to them. And then the world was on fire, right? And that's kind of how it works. I mean, it is personal. We can pretend like we are not friends and we don't know each other, or this isn't my job, or whatever, but it is also personal. And when you threaten to remove someone from a seat that they were elected to, right? There is an election certificate.
Yeah.
He
Exactly.
The canvassing board met and determined that election was valid. And now if the House reverses that, it's a very personal thing.
And it's a terrible precedent.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. All right. Okay. Well, so let's shift focus to national because there's big happenings.
Yep.
We've got the transition of power, a very historic moment happening on Monday the 20th. Donald J. Trump will be sworn in. He was 45. He's going to be 47 now as president of the United States. And Dean, so first of all, so sort of your thoughts on it. So how many how many presidents have you seen inaugurated in your that have you been to? I went in 2016. Which was a very, very interesting and a very, I think, and I'm going this week. And I think I'm very interested to see the difference between Trump's 45 election and 47.
Crowd size? Crowd size?
Just everything. Like they said that the money is just pouring in. Politico did a whole story about how the money is pouring in.
Millions of dollars from corporations
that are like
big
kissing
tech.
the ring. Yeah. Versus, 2016, I think everybody was like, he won now? What? So what inaugurations have you been to? And
I've been to two, Amy. I went to Bill Clinton's first as a young guy, and I went to Joe Biden's in 2021, which was the only inauguration that occurred during my tenure in Congress.
Oh, right, because you came in after 2016. Sure.
Did you get to sit up behind the president on the
stage?
stage?
You got the cool seats, didn't you?
No, they.
You were in the shoe. You were in the cheap seats.
I sat in the general admission audience on the ground. It was close, but it was also during COVID. It was a.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's
right.
It
wasn't during COVID. It was just cold. It was just really cold. It was probably colder than it was. It's going to be on Monday, but we were outside.
Yeah.
But, I got to tell you, when I sat at that inauguration, I wasn't seeing a Democrat or Republican inaugurated. Yeah. It's a beautiful American tradition.
Yes.
That we've kind of lost sight of what it's really about.
Yep.
And again, that saddens me. And I think only the real partisans ruin it for a lot of people. We should be generally celebrating a transition of power, no matter who it is.
Yep.
And it is. It's something I wish more Americans could just see the majesty of that handing of the torch. It's a rare occasion for most people in the world,
Yeah.
I was struck by that as well. Like when I was sitting there, I just thought the history here, right? And how few times it has happened and how powerful it was and it was, I remember the day in 2016, it was cloudy and it was rainy and I had like a plastic poncho around me and it was cold, but yet the music and the setting and the former presidents and all the congressional delegation, it really got me.
It's cool.
And I mean, I'm kind of a sappy patriot anyway, but I
want to tell you a quick story if I was sappy patriot.
Yes,
please.
About,
of course, with Jimmy Carter just passing, who knows, I think by the way, I hope, if nothing else, if you haven't seen the movie Jimmy Carter, Rock and Roll President, it is a spectacular documentary. If anybody wants.
It's on Delta flights right now.
Is it?
Oh, good. It's on Delta flights. Good.
Yep.
And, he was the only president in our respective lifetimes that didn't monetize his public office. And that to me is one of his hallmarks that we should be talking about. But the story is, Fritz Mondale was helpful to me in my first campaign. And he was reminiscing one day, and he said, do you want to know the only time I ever heard Jimmy Carter swear? And I said, I'm surprised he ever did. He said, we were inaugurated. So that would have been, obviously 1977, January. And they took a limousine from the Capitol to the White House. The Marines opened the door to the White House. Wow. They walked down a hallway that has portraits and photographs of all their predecessors, every American president in history. And Jimmy Carter is leading the way. He stops in the middle of the hallway, looks at all these portraits and photos, turns to Fritz Mondale, and says, "Can you effing believe it?" And Fritz said, we were, two adult politicians who had just won the presidency of the United States of America. But at that moment, we were two 12-year-old guys, one from Georgia, one from Minnesota. And I got to tell you, that little story, because I'm sure there's that moment for just about every president, walks in that hallway for the first time, and it reduces them to who we all really are, which is kids at heart.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's amazing. Yeah. Even I heard Trump on Rogan, and he talked about walking into the White House on his first time, and he hadn't been to D.C. He said, I wasn't in D.C. very much, and then I went to the Lincoln bedroom, and I thought, this is Abraham Lincoln, and he said, I was overcome with the history of it. It's just got to be so amazing and powerful. It's
have you been in the White House and in the?
No, I've never done the White House.
Oh yeah,
No?
I got to go one time and got to go into the Oval Office. I got a tour by Dennis McDonough, who was Obama's chief of staff.
Yeah.
And I got to be friends with him here, and then he invited me out, and
Something.
it was
Secretary of
unbelievable.
Veterans, right? Veterans
Yeah,
Affairs.
yeah.
Veterans Affairs.
Veterans
Yep.
Affairs.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, by the way, there are. I was of all my epiphanies in Washington, the number of Minnesotans
Yeah.
Yes.
that grease the wheels of our federal government in really important ways
Yeah.
too. You know, earnest, hardworking, below the radar Minnesotans. I mean, it's people know it out there too. It's really cool.
Yeah, they do. They always talk about the Minnesota, but there's something they call us the Minnesota Mafia, but it's the.
Yeah, but that doesn't sound right.
No, it doesn't.
No.
It's not like that. We're just happy-go-lucky, good government folks.
It's a Minnesota nice.
Yeah.
Minnesota Mafia.
Oh, all right, we'll do it. Doggone it, I'll clean up the church basement after the festival.
And we'll bring hot dish.
So now the announcement was made today, however, that the inauguration is going to be moved into side for the weather.
so
let's as Minnesotans
Floridian,
just
so
go around.
Floridian.
So Floridian.
I mean, come on now. I mean, Obama it was like 20-some degrees when Obama got sworn in, and he's a true Midwesterner, and he was out there.
I don't buy it.
What I had heard a little bit behind the scenes is that
I
there's
think it's
questions
security.
of security.
I think it's security.
Well, they said it was.
I think so too.
They said it was weather. They said it was too cold.
Think about it though. If you're Donald Trump and they come to you and say it's going to be 22 degrees, we're going to bring it inside.
He's
there's
not
no
doing
way.
that. No way.
No.
There's no. I couldn't agree more. I
No.
think it's absolutely
Yeah.
not because it's not that cold, and I'm sure there are concerns and threats, and this is one way to reduce it. That's it.
Yeah.
He would never.
Never.
agree
I mean,
otherwise.
think about. So they're telling. I
by the
think
way,
it's
the rotunda-
1,500 that will be.
rotunda is not that big.
No.
He's going to have big issues with that crowd size.
You know, somebody was saying, I saw it on Facebook, that my high school sent the marching band out in like 1985 or something. Is that when they did it the last time there was one inside?
So that would have been Reagan, and that would have been the last time it was inside.
I don't
Why'd they
remember
do it
that or
inside
seeing
for
pictures
Reagan?
of that. Weather, I think.
His second
cold?
Yep.
I think
It was
so.
cold? Oh.
Yep.
I would have to believe it'd have to be like below zero though to be inside.
Right.
I looked at my iPhone says it's supposed to be a high of 22 that day in DC.
Yeah.
Well, because it's literally hundreds, could be a couple hundred
That would
thousand
be the
people.
nicest inauguration in Minnesota history.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
We're all
Yeah.
like, what?
It's going to be
bringing our
negative.
shorts.
It's going to be
You're like
-4 and
sweating.
-5 here on Sunday and Monday. That's kind of cold because that's a high, and then you add the whatever. It's just like
So they're
wind
doing,
chill and everything. Like it's going to be freezing, but that's balmy.
And they're doing a watch party, an official watch party where he's going to come. I think it's at Capital One Stadium. But even that, you're
And
talking
he'll
a
come
couple,
and do
like
a
10,000 people,
Yeah.
a couple, maybe 25,000 people. I can't remember what they said it holds, but it doesn't hold that many. So for the hundreds of thousands of other people that were going, they're doing some watch parties, but it's definitely going to put a damper on the second inauguration
think
from a crowd size. It just has to, right? And like you said, I can't believe that they came to him and said it's going to be 22, and he was like, "Oh, okay, we'll take it inside." And
No chance.
hundreds of thousands of
Yeah.
people gone. No.
No
chance.
No, I mean he more than anybody is aware of the risks now, and it's
Man has had an attempt on his life
really,
twice.
really sad. truth
Well-
that we even have to think about these things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he did have an attempt on
Yeah.
his life twice, and
Yeah.
and you have to believe that that's playing a role in
Absolutely.
Yeah, so,
Absolutely.
I'm sure they take this very, very seriously now.
yeah.
Yeah. And
Enough
you
that
need to.
everything moved 2 days before.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, this has been fantastic, you all.
we didn't burn up an hour already.
Yeah, we're pretty close by the time you do plugs and everything. We got to do plugs and Spanks. And
Oh,
things,
that's right,
so.
I guess.
Yeah. All right. So see, like
Quick. It's quick.
it goes quick, doesn't it?
I love
All right.
it.
So let's start with plugs. So this is your opportunity. Tell us what you're up to. If you got some appearances. Again, Brian has a hole in him that only attention can fill. So we have a plug segment where you can talk about like if you're doing some radio or TV or anything like that.
Okay.
Okay, Carla, what are you working on? Anything you want to plug?
Well, one thing that I will plug is we received a grant, Washington County did, and we now have a mobile van that will provide in-community mental health and substance use programming in communities. So we're very proud of that.
Very
so
nice
I will plug that. And that'll be at community events and be able to provide those services throughout Washington County, which is a long, narrow county and a lot of communities to fill. So.
Ah, there you go. See, good plug. Anything, Kurt?
You know,
You don't have to.
not a ton. I'm doing a little bit of, people are asking because I'm a former Speaker of the House to kind of do analysis on what's going on in the House. So I'm doing Mary LaHammer's Almanac at the Capitol next Wednesday night.
That's a good plug.
And then
We
I
love
think
Mary.
I think I'm on Almanac on Friday night next week. With Margaret Kelleher, former Speaker Kelleher, her and I. And I think they're going to have us on regularly to do kind of a former speakers thing, just the two of us to kind of talk about and give analysis of what's going on throughout the session. And they're doing that, I think, because of this tied House and we can kind of, give our 2 cents.
Yeah, it is good for punditry, I will say that.
Yeah.
The split and
I'm thrilled that somebody cares about what I think still, right? Somebody's still
always
calling.
care, Kurt.
I know.
I always care. I
teasing.
always want to see you doing stuff. Dean, anything? What are you working on? What's exciting?
I'm working on my recovery. I'll tell you, Amy, my mission is, I'm just redoubling my efforts to do what I intended to do from the beginning, which is just, bring an eye of common sense and find a way to introduce center-right and center-left Americans to one another and dispel this notion that angertainment would have us believe we're so divided it's intractable, to encourage problem solving. And I've turned down every single media appearance request in the last couple weeks, and there have been plenty. And other than this, because this is the first one that has some Republicans and Democrats who dig each other, call it like they see it, and kind of hug it out after. And that's just so darn rare. And that's why I love what all of you
Hug it out.
and what you're doing. I want to see Braver Angels, of course, which is Bill Doherty from Minnesota. His organization,
Yes, great.
Thrive. I want to see Americans not resign themselves to this nonsense and retreat to the corners, but actually participate in trying to do better. And that's what I'm going to take this year to really reflect and do some writing and some contemplation. And of course, I'm getting a lot of calls from journalists who are writing books about the 2024 election, and you can imagine their questions of me. And like I said, I'm going to call it like I see it. I'm going to tell the truth and encourage others to do the same. And lastly, I think we should all be spending some time on helping recruit younger Americans, conservatives and progressives, but most importantly, problem solvers and respectful, decent people, and just find platform for them, because I know and you all know that we can do better. And I just want to lower the temperature, bring some levity to this nonsense. And I'm tuning out a little bit, which is a weird thing to say considering how tethered we are to Twitter and newscasts and reports. But it's actually been really refreshing to take a couple weeks away from cable news and getting off Twitter and Punchline and Politico. And once you do, it's like a cleansing. And you start realizing that, again, 99.9% of Americans just don't care about this nonsense. And they just want things to get done in a responsible way. So that's what I'm working on. And I can't wait to spend some more time with all of you, because we could all be the answer.
Amy, can I?
Yes,
yeah,
you can.
Can I, for once in my career, play journalist and ask him a question? Dean, I have to, as I was sitting here thinking about this and how people feel about this election, and I know that it's difficult for us it's difficult to criticize your own party and to step up and say, you know what, we're doing it wrong. You have always been somebody who has been willing to do that and really call the balls and strikes the way you see them, regardless of it's something that's going to hurt your party. As you look back at this now, and I don't want to say, do you feel redeemed? But you were the one person who was speaking out in the Democratic Party to say, hey, this probably isn't the right thing, and I'm going to give another option. And ultimately, the party, got to that place and made that decision, and put another candidate in place. But and I don't know you super well, but I know you well enough to know you're not somebody who's going to say, I feel vindicated, right? Because that's not how you think. But what are your feelings about just looking at this in the rearview mirror now and how it all unfolded?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I feel vindication in the way you might feel vindication by telling people that ice is cold and they finally come to the same conclusion.
Right.
And this was not. I would never tell anybody that somehow I saw something that nobody else did, and therefore I had some unique sense of reality. That's what really disappointed me, Kurt, is we all saw, and my colleagues had been critical of our colleagues on the other side for 4 years when it came to very similar circumstances with Donald Trump, and that they would talk smack about him relentlessly behind the scenes, and then the lights and the cameras would come on, and the guy could do no wrong. so when I saw my own side doing the same thing, saying that Joe, he cannot run again. He's slowing down. He's going to lose. And then when the cameras came on defending him, it was atrocious. But to wrap up the answer to your question, Kurt, what I really realized is, we have a perverse incentive structure in politics. And you all know this. When you enter politics and you wish to build a career and walk up that ladder of leadership, there's only one path to it. And that is to play by the rules and stay in line. And in a way, I had the luxury of knowing this was not going to be a long career. It's not where I started. I didn't think it would be where I ended. And I recognized my privilege in that respect, that I could say things and do things that would end other careers, but I always had that intention. But the sad truth is, without term limits, especially at the federal level, you're never going to see people be courageous no matter what side of the aisle they're on, no matter what the issue, because we're programmed to really put self-preservation above principle. And my only mission was to call attention to that and remind people that it doesn't matter if people don't know your name. It doesn't matter if they laugh at you. It doesn't matter if they criticize you or try to knock you down. When you have conviction and you elevate it and pursue it, some way, somehow, there will be a personal reward. And that personal reward has come simply in all the young people around the country that have written notes saying thank you. Thanks for being courageous. Thanks for taking the chance. A lot of my Republican colleagues acknowledging it, and a lot of my Democratic colleagues acknowledging it. And I'll never say I told you so, because we all saw it. It's just a matter of nobody willing to give up their career to do something about it. And that's where American courage, I think, needs to be reestablished.
Well, it reminds me of that old saying, honesty is telling the truth. Integrity is telling the truth, even if it hurts you, right? And I don't think this hurt you in any way. And I think at the end of the tunnel here, people are seeing that you were somebody who stepped up. And like I said, we don't know each other super well, but I just really think highly of your integrity in this whole situation. So
Thank you,
kudos.
That means the world to me. I love these conversations. By the way, this was
Aren't
selfish.
these great? Aren't they great?
I'm leaving this talk, this podcast, loving the conversation and really respecting all of you, and just we're modeling the behavior that nobody is doing in our former careers. And I just celebrate all of you too. And grateful. So thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Okay, well, that's perfect. So let's do some spanks and thanks. This is the part where you get a couple minutes to just thank or spank something from the week, and it can be political, it can be cultural, it can be personal, whatever you want to do.
Okay, so
all right, let's start with Biggie. Go for it.
So we've already established that I'm a football fanatic. It's the one thing that keeps my marriage together. I mean, if my husband did not like football, we would not be together. That's all I'm going to say. So my spank is the Philadelphia Eagle fan. The one that was hurling, according to the New York Times article, was hurling misogynistic taunts towards the Packer fan, the female Packer fan. I mean, I don't like to defend Packer fans.
No.
But we got to have respect for the love of the game. So that's my spank. He lost his job at a DEI firm and was banned from Lincoln Field as a result of it. So that didn't end well for him. So behave, enjoy the game, and let's show some respect. All right. My thank is to President Joe Biden. He's wrapping up 50-plus years of public service, and something that's near and dear to both Speaker Dowd and I. He started his career as a county commissioner, and so just want to thank him for all of his years of service.
Lovely. All right, Dean, you ready? You want to go?
So Spank, I mean, this is you'd have to have an awfully big hand to do as many spanks as. As I just mentioned, I just want to spank everybody in a position of power that would be so detrimental to the country that they put their personal interests over what we all know we got to do, which is just figure things out and come together.
Yeah.
And there are too many people I want to spank, including, you can imagine, some in Minnesota right now. But I'll tell you, this gives me a chance to actually thank hundreds of thousands of people that somehow through digital media or through handshakes and high fives and hugs and campaigning that I probably encountered over these last 6 years. And I never spoke of it when I was in Congress, but I can now tell you, having concluded 3 terms, that I never had one person, not a single individual in Minnesota or anywhere else, come up to me and treat me rudely, aggressively, threatening, not one. And I want to thank everybody, because when I went to a MAGA rally in New Hampshire, people could not have been more hospitable. When I go around our state, my community, our country, I've never met people who are rude. And that means Democrats, Republicans, far left, far right. And I want to thank all those people because that's who we really are. And we got to raise our game and remind the rest of the country that that's how we do it. And that makes me optimistic and hopeful. And I want to thank everybody who gave me that chance and treated me with respect, and I returned it in kind, and that's what it's all about.
Nice, nice.
Lovely. Mr. Speaker.
Spanks and thanks. My spank is for former Speaker Melissa Hortman, who, and I think we all have seen really great political instincts, and people do really, things that ended up being really successful. I gotta say that this not showing up and denying a quorum is one of the worst that I've seen, and for the wrong reasons. I just think it's a tactical error on her part. I think there was a lot of legacy that maybe was on the line for her. Had she finished this term, she would have tied Steve Sviggum being the longest serving speaker in state history.
Wow.
Nobody's talking about that. But
Woo, that's a stat.
And had she won one more term,
She would have been the longest.
could have been the longest serving speaker in state history. However, I just don't think this was good, and not showing up, and the public doesn't understand it. So my spank is for a bad political decision, I think. And my thanks is for somebody that we lost recently that I got to know through the legislature is former Senator Carrie Dietzick. And she just, she was part of the Tom Bach crew in the Senate, and I think it's the worst kept secret in politics that Tom Bach and I were really good friends as leaders and opposite parties, but we really got along well. And I got to know her and just really respected her integrity. And whether we agreed with each other's politics, she was in it for the right reason. And she was one of the greats, I think, in the Minnesota legislature, and she will definitely be missed.
Very lovely. And we're in Northeast. We're in her territory.
We are.
She's a Northeaster.
We are.
All right. So I'm doing a rare triple thank, and it is for all of you, but I want to do a little specific because when I threw this together last week, first of all, thank you for just stepping up and doing it. Kind of the gentleman decided to go on vacation, which is great for them, but
who needs them?
Who needs? Honestly, I think people are going to be. I told you, people are going to demand.
It's kind of like the Lou Gehrig moment.
That's right.
We want to report on ratings to see how high we are.
All right, with the downloads.
Biggest ratings ever.
I think you know what? I heard that. It was the largest ratings ever.
Yes.
Yeah.
Huge.
It's huge.
Huge.
So for Carla, thank you so much. We have known each other. I think we first met at the Almanac.
In the legislature, you were in the Senate when I was in the House.
Yes. But I don't know if we ever really met when I was in the Senate, and you were in the House, and then we met on Almanac.
I was just a House member.
You have the most beautiful mother and father. I love them. They've sort of your mother has adopted me since my mother passed away. Yes. I feel like Mama Bigham is now my mom.
Yes.
And you've been so gracious to share her with me. And you don't come at me too hard on the fantasy football. And I love being able to see you out and about as we do these different things. So thank you, Mr. Speaker, my good friend, who I adore and love, and I admired you and your talents so greatly. I knew as soon as you came in, I remember your first session, and we were doing some vote on something, and I almost voted the way you didn't think I was going to vote, and then you came up, you're like, hey, what's going on with this? And I was like, oh yeah, okay, all right, you're right, I'm with you. You convinced me otherwise. But you have been you're an incredible political talent. Minnesota is very lucky to have you. They're very lucky to have had you as Speaker. They're very lucky to have you as a statesman. And I'm very lucky to have you as a friend. So thank you.
Thank you.
And Congressman Phillips, Dean. First of all, so you came on the podcast the first time. Your first time was right after January 6th. And you have given us what has been, besides this show now, but what at the time was the episode that we heard the most about. You spoke for a very long time about what went down in that chamber. And really, it was something that I think across, certainly across Minnesota, but really somebody that the Americans had not heard about what it was like to be inside the Capitol that day. And you spoke very openly and very honestly about it. And it was incredibly powerful. And we still continue to this day to hear about that episode. It was amazing. And afterwards, we always said, well, then you did a few interviews afterwards about it, but really it was here first that we heard it. And it was incredible and amazing. I have always appreciated your honesty, your openness, your friendship. We've, had sort of a back and forth and texting relationship, and I'm grateful for that. And so thank you for that. Thanks for what you do. We're grateful. Yes.
Did you see the breaking news on the
Kurt was right.
on the screen?
Oh no!
The Supreme
Kurt
Court
was right?
The Supreme Court just ruled that the governor called that special election prematurely.
Yeah, and
it
right.
was.
It was.
If you read the statute, it was. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
See,
So that will delay, and actually, this is a big win for Republicans.
Huge win.
Whether they should have gotten this win or not, I don't know. But the reality is now it'll be tougher for Melissa and the Democrats to stay out because this will push that special election. It'll push the 67-67 tie
month,
back.
right?
It'll push it back potentially 21 days later than it would have been.
Yep. So now there'll be some
more.
conversations now.
Could
There'll
be
be
30
some
days.
conversations.
But honestly, it was. I felt like this direct reading of the statute. That was an obvious one that this was called prematurely.
Yes.
The seat was not vacant. There
Right.
was no way it was
Yeah.
vacant. Okay,
Anyway.
well,
Thank you,
we'll
Amy.
add that to the
Thank you.
fake whiteboard.
Yep.
So there you go. All right. And Kurt was
Good to
we were
see
right.
you, Dean. Really
Yeah.
good to see you.
So
Yeah, good to
hold
see
on,
you.
we got to do so.
Oh.
So I am. You got to do the thing, guys.
Oh, sorry.
I am former Republican Senate Majority Leader headed to Washington D.C. Amy Koch.
And I am recovering legislator Kurt Dowd.
I am former DFL State Senator Carla Bigham.
And I, recovering former congressman, formerly honorable Dean Phillips.
And we are
Wrong about everything.